Hi, and welcome to Everybody's Business. I'm your host, Valerie Hellerman, and this show is sponsored by the Helena Peace Seekers. Today we're at the Holter Museum in Helena, Montana, and I'm really pleased to be here with my dear friend Katie Knight, who is the curator of this fabulous show called Speaking Volumes, Transforming Hate. Welcome, Katie.
Thanks, Valerie.
Oh, this is such a fabulous show. It's such a privilege to be here, especially in these times, but this show is what, 10 years old?
Well, it's been on the road and being exhibited for 10 and a half years. We worked on it for almost 3 years before that, so it's been a 14-year effort so far.
Wow, and how did this show start?
Well, this exhibition has a really unique starting point in that in 2003, a leader of what was then called World Church of the Creator, now they call themselves the Creativity Movement. It's a neo-Nazi white supremacist group that had some ties in Superior, Montana. The leader, JR, wanted to get away from his colleagues, so he called up Ken Toole and Christine Kaufman, who were then co-chairs of the Montana Human Rights Network, and he told them for a nominal sum of money, he would transfer to them the contents of 2 big storage lockers in Superior, Montana. They checked it out, found out that actually all the assets of the creativity movement had been transferred to Southern Poverty Law Center in a federal court case. So they were not purchasing stolen property, but in fact, turning it to good use by taking it out of the hands of this extremist hate group. They deprived them of both a source of ideological continuity as well as financial income because they were selling books. In the lockers, there were 4,100 books, some of which are here in the show right now in very transformed state. And so they were stuck with all these books, 4,100 books. They distributed about 500 to research organizations around the country that monitor and work to counteract hate groups, and they still had like 3,600 volumes. That's where I got involved. Ken's high school age son had the idea of turning them into art. And so I met with Christine Kaufman and Arnie Fishbaugh, and they asked me to curate an exhibition.
Wow, what a journey that was.
Yeah.
So you invited artists?
Right, so I came back to the Holter Museum. I said I really would like to do it here at the museum where I was then curator of education, because then we would both have a venue and professional staff to prepare the show. So Brandon Renches and Sandra Hines said, go for it, and we did. And we invited 40 artists who are really very well known for their social justice content. 12 said yes. And then we put out a broader call for all around the country for submissions. And so the other work in the show I chose from juried submissions.
Wow. And how many pieces were in that original show?
99 works by 60 artists and artist teams.
Wow.
Were the 2008 show. And since then, 39 works have been traveling.
And they've traveled where?
27 venues from coast to coast, including Manhattan in New York City, San Diego, Augusta, Georgia, Fort Collins, Tulsa, Oklahoma, Utah, Kansas, Iowa, and many more venues.
And what is the message of this show?
So the purpose of this show is to be a catharsis for dialogue and examination of our personal prejudiced views, as well as conversations about how we can support social justice and end discrimination against others.
Wow. And what has been the general reaction while it's traveled? I know there's been some really great reactions to this, and good work came of it.
Well, there's been opportunity for deep dialogue in every community. Before it was here, the last venue was Ogden, Utah, where 200 people turned out for a town hall discussion of racism and how to counter it in their own community. In Tulsa, Oklahoma, it was located at Living Arts, which is on the grounds of the historic Greenwood community, where in 1921, a thriving African-American neighborhood and businesses were looted, firebombed, burned to the ground, and hundreds killed. So on that grounds, it was part of a larger effort toward discussion of reconciliation and reparations.
Mm-hmm. So these pieces, they're so moving, and later on you'll do a tour with some of those pieces, but tell me about some that for you as the curator were the most moving or, you know, really spoke to you. I know like these behind us you'll talk about later, but these are just phenomenal. And what are these? Just tell us briefly.
Well, so for this venue, I invited 5 new artists to participate in the show. And these large columns that are hanging are part of the tag project by Wendy Maruyama, in which each column is composed of thousands of tags that are exact reproductions of those that were worn by Japanese and Japanese Americans who were interned in the camps during World War II. So she had community collaboration among a lot of people to research and use the actual names and locations. So each column is a different camp.
And these are only part of that show, right?
Right. There are actually 11 columns in the whole project. We got 4 of them and chose them on the basis of the nearest camp, which is Heart Mountain, as well as the largest camp and the camp where Wendy's parents were.
Mm-hmm. Wow, it's pretty amazing. So today, 2018, in this difficult environment, how do you hope this show will affect people and maybe work towards more social justice in our consciousness?
Well, it is hard times. It's what I call the culture wars, you know, the conflict between those who want to maintain white privilege, male privilege, and those who recognize the need to give everyone equal opportunity to resources and opportunities. So my optimism is founded really on the young generations, those who find things like homophobia and racism absurd and irrational and want to move beyond it. But it is important that we each become aware of how we have been shaped by our position and our labels so that we can have those deeper reflections and conversations and hopefully move to changed policies.
Mm-hmm. You know, when you talk about the younger people, yeah, that is the hope for our future. Mm-hmm. Although here in Helena, I do see a couple of trucks driving around with Confederate flags with young folks in them. And when I see it, I wonder, do they know what that represents?
You know, maybe on a superficial basis, but I have a feeling they don't totally understand that that Confederate flag is a symbol of white supremacy and a celebration of slavery, really. I have a feeling that to some of them it represents rebellion and independence and, you know, taking a stand and getting attention.
So the Halter is inviting schools to come in to this exhibit, and there's a whole curriculum involved with this?
Right. So Sandra Hines is the curator of education, and she has a lot of different plans and activities. So many groups will come through and participate in the tour as well as hands-on creative projects.
So it's really an opportunity for our young people to understand some symbolism and what's really behind it, like the Confederate flag.
Yeah, and also just stories. Every
Yeah.
single piece here in the show tells the story of an artist and their exploration of personal or social history, and either the creation of alternative models or some kind of humanizing narrative about what's happened. So, for example, I'm sitting here facing the portrait of Timothy McVeigh, and a lot of my students, none of whom were born during the Oklahoma City bombing, they don't know what happened, and they certainly don't realize that McVeigh was influenced by very similar books.
It's really interesting because that photograph of Timothy McVeigh was here 10 years ago, and I remembered it over all these years. And when I came back, it makes me tearful because he looks like such a average, normal young man, and he was so influenced by these books and white supremacy, and it just seemed like he was this vulnerable youth who had a rough go of his own life and was so negatively influenced, and it's heartbreaking for me to even look at that portrait. But I'm so glad that we have something like this show that's traveling around the country to offer dialogue to our kids about, to all of us as adults. I mean, I think you're right. We all have to look at our own prejudices. And, art kind of is the bridge to that dialogue.
It's a very good catalyst because the work here is so diverse, and the artists not only use completely different materials and designs and construction methods and medias, but also they have different strategies for how to transform hate, from telling that personal story, the narrative, to bearing witness, to humor and satire, to juxtaposing two things you wouldn't expect to see together so that we go, whoa, what is that about? And then you have to reflect more deeply. So I love the diverse strategies of the pieces here. There's something that I think will hook just about anybody. And some of the artists actually took the books and reconfigured them. Others, covered them and recontextualized them. And others didn't even touch the books, but are still dealing with deconstructing racism and sexism and homophobia.
One of the interesting pieces, I don't think it's in this show, but I remember this, was somebody took the book and with an X-Acto knife cut out every racial slur or negativity, and it was like fine lace. There was nothing in the book.
That was Ariana Boussard.
Oh, and
Rifle.
she did a painting with her daughter this year, right?
So Dana Boussard is the Montana artist who painted the words from the books onto her daughter's body. And we have a series of photographs from that performance piece. And then her daughter, Ariana, did the cutouts.
That was so pretty profound.
Yeah, she took that piece back, so that one hasn't been traveling.
So what piece here most moved you, or what was one of the most moving pieces?
Well, I have to say that a couple of them that are really bearing witness pieces, and also I put them in the category of layering beauty over horror and ugliness. One is Jean Grosser's 8 memorials for family members who were killed in the Holocaust, or some of them escaped and came to the United States. And they're just simple little portraits in small shrines with artifacts that Jean made from the books and cutting them up. And they're extremely personal and poignant. So to me, that's a really important piece, because the crux of the content of these books is to blame Jews for all the evil in the world. And so to show the consequences, one of which is, of course, the Holocaust, is really important. And another piece that moved me to tears when I first saw it is Scott Schultz. It's called Unbound, and it is a beadwork figure of Laura Nelson, who was hung along with her 14-year-old son in Okemos, Oklahoma in 1911. And the image of Laura Nelson appears in 2 of the works here. But Scott created this very beautiful beaded early American style sampler piece. And then he wants people to lay their hands upon her dress and, you know, in that way empathize with Laura.
It's one of my favorite pieces too. I just feel like going over there. I'm looking at it right now. Just wanting to touch it. It's so beautiful,
Right, but it also, you know, evokes the ghosts of all those lynchings that were such a widespread practice after the end of slavery in order to repress African Americans and terrorize them.
And this year, you got to do a piece.
I did.
Join the show. Tell us about where it came from in you.
Well, as a mother and a grandmother and a teacher, I am so concerned about what we are passing on to our children. What kind of planet, in terms of climate chaos, and what kind of society because of the horrors, really, of the culture wars. And so I took some of my photographs of children that I've made in Latin America, Africa, and here at home in the US. And they're all photographs of children holding some emblematic object, whether it's a paper lifeboat or a chicken or 3 stones. And so I printed these using cyanotype, an antique photographic process, onto fabric and toned them, and sewed a great big accordion fold book, which is a sculptural book. It can be set up as a swastika that goes in the direction of the Nazi swastika, which is a very chilling symbol for almost everybody, or in the direction of the ancient swastika symbol that was used on almost every continent as a symbol of health and peace. So, of course, my book is set up in the peaceful swastika configuration. But it's really asking the question, what are we going to do? And so the title of the piece is "The Answer is in Your Hands." And my grandson helped me tear pages out of the white man's Bible and write these words, "The answer is in your hands." And he appears with photographs of these pages that he made.
It's a really fabulous piece, and
Thank you.
you'll get to see it in the next segment here. So just to kind of wrap this up, where does this show go next, Katie?
I don't know.
But it will go into storage, but it will continue to be on tour?
I sure hope so. We have to find venues. As a full-time teacher and doing a lot of care for my parents, I have not been out there promoting the show much, but you know, I think it will be appealing to other venues and will go on.
And it's particularly important now, 10 years later?
Oh, I'm afraid so, really. After this show closed from the very first exhibition and we elected Barack Obama as president, I really felt like, oh, you know, we'll do the Montana tour to 11 Montana venues and that'll probably be it. But no, it's unfortunately more relevant than ever.
Yeah. Well, Katie, you have done an amazing job curating this show, and I want to thank you from the whole community for doing this. And I also just want to ask all you community members, don't miss this show. It is so amazing, and there's something that will get to the heart of each and every one of us and help us to examine those issues of prejudice that we probably don't even know that we have. We all kind of think of ourselves as pretty liberal, and then you read something, hear or see something in the show, and it's like, oh my God,
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
it's so educational and so important for our youth. So bring your kids and spend time with them. And again, Katie, thank you so much.
And I want to thank you, Valerie, both for the interview, but also for having two really beautiful pieces in the exhibition, reflecting this teachings of compassion that are so fundamental to your belief system.
Well, thank you.
I'm really excited to update this show with new work by an artist from Madison, Wisconsin, Louis Koch. Louis Koch is, he's kind of an anthropologist as a photographer, and so he's looking at visual evidence of who we are. He created this installation of banners starting when he was in Vancouver, Canada, just before the 2016 presidential election. And he had the opportunity to pass by a new building that hadn't quite opened yet. It is Trump Tower. And so the big letters over the door are draped, which is a little bit subtle, although we have a photograph and an artist statement that helps you figure it out. And Louis really wants us to think about corruption, emoluments, and the monetization of public space. So I'm very happy that we can update our show with a reference to how white supremacy has moved from the margins of extremist neo-Nazi groups to the mainstream, to the highest level. So Maggie Rostocki-Hiltner is one of the new artists in this exhibition, and what we got was two of her quilt pieces. She reworks antique quilts and embroidery that she has collected to construct a new meaning for them. And in this piece, Requiem, she's taken a pre-World War II quilt that was in the configure of the Catch Me If You Can or whirligig design, which is a swastika image, and painstakingly removed the swastika images, which are now in a jumble at the bottom, and then up from them fly all kinds of embroidered birds. So it's a transformation. People loved this design before it was appropriated by the Nazis. Korky Clermont from St. Ignatius, Montana, is a very reflective, conceptual artist and printmaker. He did this piece in which he documented his journey from Missoula up to the tar sands in Alberta, Canada, which is the site of this really dirty petroleum that is in the Keystone pipeline. And so Korky is asking us to make a choice between water or petroleum. And he's exposing the horrific consequences of this tar sands extraction project, which is destroying this huge boreal forest. And so every 50 miles on his journey from Missoula to the tar sands, he stopped and made photographs and documented it with his printmaking. There's a lot more to that story, but this is it in a nutshell. When he got up there, he hired a plane and flew over to photograph the devastation and the destruction of this project. So he's configured it as a tic-tac-toe game, and you can move the X's and O's all around. The surface of the X's and O's are prints that he made with a calligraphic process. and include Indian head nickels and images of the bear that he photographed along the journey that he made. So on the one hand, it's kind of playful, but on the other hand, it's deeply disturbing. And he used black plastic, which is, of course, a petroleum product, as the foundation for his construction. Jean Quick-to-See Smith is a very nationally recognized artist and curator and thinker. She is from the Salish Kootenai Reservation, currently living in Albuquerque, and she collaborated with her son, Neil Ambrose Smith, who is also an artist, a photographer, and a printmaker, and they created Blue Eyes, Brown Eyes, which is, it's really exciting to show the whole thing the way they wanted us to lay it out, because it's in four rows high. It takes a really huge space to show this work. Now, Blue Eyes, Brown Eyes is the name of an experiment that was done by Jane Elliott when she wanted to teach her little third graders in Iowa about the experience of discrimination. And she came up with this lesson the day after Martin Luther King was assassinated in 1968. It's been a groundbreaking lesson that she continues to teach. And so this concept of helping children understand discrimination by giving preference to them based on eye color was a really kind of a concept that Jean Quick-to-See Smith and Neil Ambrose Smith used when they collaborated with their friends to create this photographic assemblage. And if you look at it carefully, you will notice that the same people who are on the turquoise background with the red eyes are the same people who are on the red background with the turquoise eyes. That really what they're trying to do is get us to reflect on and deconstruct this concept of prejudice and race. So yeah, this is a piece that a lot of people don't understand, but it's okay if you don't understand it. Come up with your own interpretation. Unique to this presentation of Speaking Volumes, Transforming Hate is an artist book reading library. Now, what we wanted to do was invite anybody who is moved to create a work for this show to construct an artist book. Generally, when you think about books, you think of nice bound volumes and you can turn the pages, but some of these artists chose to do sculptural books, like these two accordion fold books. This one is based on the experience of providing a medical support in Standing Rock. And so it was created by three of the people who went. Judy Payton, Valerie Hellerman, and Jennifer Thompson did this beautiful piece. Sandy Casey assembled work by some of her friends and her grandchildren, family members in this accordion fold book. Here's a sculptural book by Dana Boussard that references the huge house sculpture she made for the first Speaking Volumes, Transforming Hate exhibition. So this one is called Hate Begins at Home. There's another really interesting sculptural book on this table. Marion Lavery is inviting people to make peace cranes and put them into the pages of her piece. The shelves contain artist books from, they come from New Mexico, they come from North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and Helena, Montana, Bozeman, Missoula, other places where people have collaborated with others or worked individually to make really interesting book forms to express their hope that art can create transformation and a better world.